Since the engine is ready to go back into the car, I went ahead and removed the fender since we're going to be coming through the side like we took it out, and I didn't want to cause any more damage to that fender. I also went ahead and removed this panel earlier, and I drilled a hole so we could attach the connector. Remember I was telling you guys about this, that I was going to do it once I pull the engine out. So that went ahead and got knocked out, and now that thing is being retained right there. So let me get the engine hoist ready, and hopefully I could get this thing in without any casualties. So I decided to stop because I need an extra set of hands on this. So I went over, called my friend, he lives next door, and he's gonna help me get the engine in. The thing is, I have to manage this side and the controls of the engine hoist, but I cannot be on this side at the same time and making sure that the engine is going in the right place. The last time I tried putting this engine in by myself, the transmission rocked forward, hit the master cylinder, and that cost me $100 because it cracked it. I don't want that same thing to happen again. So it's just easier to have a second set of eyes on this side guiding the engine where it needs to go. So that's the game plan. You can see how far I have the engine hoist in, right? And the engine isn't really fully where it has to go. You can see the hoist is already pressing on the fender liner, which doesn't matter, guys. It's just made out of plastic. It's fine. But it just goes to show how I dented the fender trying to get the engine out, because look how close this thing needs to get. Alright, so my friend came over, he helped. As you can see, we got this mount lined up. This is the most difficult part of the job, guys, getting it to swoop in at the right angle without hitting anything, and then getting this mount to line up. Once this mount is in place, it's just a walk in the park from here, okay? Because this side, you guys saw the bolt-in mount that I made. That'll just get dropped in, bolted in, and this mount always falls in place as long as this one is in place. And then the rear mount, again, walk in the park. So the hard work is done, guys. So I'm just moving along here, just putting everything and anything back together. On this side, the axle has been pushed back into the mid shaft. I just finished doing the headers right now. You can see they have been reinstalled. And guys, round of applause for the header gasket. It's the only gasket on this entire teardown that did not get replaced due to it being metal. So anyway, as you can see, I took off the cap for the valve cover, and we're gonna go ahead and pour our oil in right now, number one, so that we don't forget about it. Showed you guys earlier, we got a brand new Honda filter already installed. So let me finish topping off the oil, making sure it's all set. And since this is just break-in oil, it doesn't have to be in the engine long. In fact, I'm going to do a 30-minute runtime, and then I'm going to drain out this oil. So it's the next day, and I'm making pretty good progress here. I got the charge harness connected to everything, so it just sends power to the starter and the alternator. I started plugging in even more sensors. As you can see, we got the fuel system all plumbed in. There was the fuel pressure regulator. All the lines have been connected. This was done yesterday, the shift cables. I even got the coolant hoses going to the radiator, all plumbed in. Everything's connected. What else? Oh, I just finished bleeding the clutch. You can see the slave cylinder right there. I got my line connected going into my little bottle right there, brake fluid, and I just tested it. I'll show you guys a short clip that the clutch fork is moving, so that's good. I still got to put the axle in on that side, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. I'm not looking forward to that. Anyway, I think I'm going to slide underneath the car right now. So the header is connected to the exhaust. I got my air intake installed, sensors plugged in, batteries reconnected. Showed you guys I put oil in it already. There's no coolant just yet, but I'm not worried about that right now. I just grabbed the laptop, got it connected right there. Let's crank the engine over and see if we could build up any oil pressure. Tell me why I'm super nervous. Even though I know the engine was running before I tore it apart, the fact that everything has been torn apart, I'm just like crazy nervous about this. I feel like it's starting again for the first time, you know, that type of anxiety. So fuel pump is priming. By the way, there's no spark plugs in it, and the fuel injectors are not connected. Contact. Good news is the engine sounds very consistent, guys. I hope you guys heard that. There's like no noise at all. It just sounds like a free spinning engine. No type of knocking or noise coming from inside. I'm gonna do one more crank and then go out there and check for leaks. Alright, you can see we have fuel pressure on the gauge. I don't see any leaks of anything. There's also nothing on the ground. Everything looks real good. No drips, no leaking of anything. Alright. At this point, guys, let's put the spark plugs in. The engine sounds really good turning over. As you can see, spark plugs are in, cores are plugged in, everything's good to go. Now, I was gonna attempt to start it right now, guys, but I don't have coolant in it, and I know it's fine to start the engine just for a few seconds without any coolant, but I've always just cringed at the fact of people starting engines with no coolant because of the water pump. That thing, to me, should be lubricated whenever it's spinning. So why is there a reason to not add antifreeze? You get what I'm saying? I'm banking on that this thing is just going to work and everything's going to be dandy and everyone's going to be happy. So let's go ahead and put coolant, and let me not make a mess. That's what I'm using. Now, I know the container looks dirty, but that's just the outside of the funnel. Okay, the inside of the funnel is clean. Also, you may have noticed that the last time I had the engine running, I was using water in the system as a temporary thing. And this time I'm actually putting coolant in it. So that tells you something about the level of confidence that I have with this thing. Oh God, please just let it work and everything be good. So I'm done putting the coolant in the system. Like I said, the spark plugs are in, coils are connected. The only thing I don't have connected just yet is the fuel injectors, because I want to crank it over with compression and just make sure it sounds good. All right, that sounded amazing. Compression sounds nice and even. No weird noises. All right, here we go. Hope she wanted to go. Turned on for a second, stalled all by itself. Try it again. Okay, I'm not sure why she's turning off by herself, but when she is running, sounds good. All right, try it again. Okay, so let's see what happens if I actually try to hold the accelerator pedal down to keep it idling. Nope. Try it again. Does not like that. Won't even let me hold the accelerator pedal down. Alright, so it's later in the day and I'm able to get back to this. So the car's still doing the same thing, turns on and installs immediately. So what I'm seeing, so we do have an update for the software. I'm gonna go ahead and update that and hope for the best. Hopefully it doesn't make the whole system crash. Anyway, up here in the corner in the red, you can see it says intake cam angle not calibrated. So that can be good, right? I'm sure we need that to be calibrated in order for the engine to run properly. So that might be a clue as to what's going on, but I don't know how to calibrate this thing. I don't know. Let's go ahead and do the update first. So I just updated the software on the laptop, and as soon as that was done, I get this warning. That's interesting. Guess there's no option, right? It's saying that there's issues with the firmware, and do you want to change to a different version? Okay, well, yes, if there's a known issue. All right, so the software update is all done. Now that thing is no longer red. I don't know if it means anything. Well, the engine hasn't tried to run since the software update, so I'm just going to cycle the key. Try to start it, see what happens. Same thing. And there it goes. Take cam angle not calibrated. So I tried swapping sensors around for the intake side. For the crank sensor, it doesn't make a difference, guys. But I did notice this. It says trigger not supported, extra tooth. Okay, so it's the next day, and guys, I had trouble sleeping last night because this seems just heavy on my mind. You know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out why the engine won't stay running, because I'm thinking to myself, when we pulled the engine out of the car, this engine would start up and run. And nothing has changed. I didn't change a single thing as far as the car side. As far as the engine just went back to normal. We didn't find an actual problem, right? I'm like, why isn't it starting? But then I had an epiphany last night while I was sleeping. Well, not during the sleep. You get what I'm saying? While I was trying to sleep. But I thought to myself, you know what? Something has changed. We changed out what I'm suspecting to be the actual problem, the VTC solenoid and the VTC spool valve. Okay, so we did change something on the engine. And then that's when things started to click. Remember, the tuner saw that the VTC wasn't matching on the engine, so what he was doing was trying to compensate for that using software. Okay, so he's changing parameters around to try to get the engine to run good using software. But now that we potentially fixed the problem on the engine with spool valve and the VTC solenoid, all of a sudden the software that the tuner put into here essentially is no longer valid, because the engine is in a different functional state than what is being applied here on the software side. I hope that makes sense, guys. The grand idea I had last night was, I bet you the base map needs to be reapplied. We need to get rid of what the tuner was doing and basically start over from scratch, because the engine is now running in a different state, and that's how we need to do things. So I came out here just a few minutes ago. I plugged back in the USB stick from Haltech that has the base maps on it, and I re-uploaded the DC5 base map starting from scratch. I made sure to choose the correct injectors this time, because remember, we had that first problem the first time I tried to start the engine. So I put in the correct injectors. And guys, I haven't done anything besides upload the base map again, getting rid of the map that the tuner was messing with. Let me show you what happens now. Oh, another thing. So I showed you guys yesterday how there was an update to the Haltech software, right? After the update, and after I installed the base map, guess what's the first thing I heard turn on? My cooling fan. My cooling fan never worked before, which I'm like, what the heck? The cooling fan actually works? See, I thought it was a wiring issue on my side, because I do have it wired in how I thought is the correct way it's supposed to go. But the cooling fan has still never worked, so I just thought, okay, there's some wiring bugs I got to figure out. But nope. After the base map was installed, I heard the cooling fan kick in. So that tells me all along I had that cooling fan wired up correctly. The problem was another glitch inside the Haltech software, which they seem to have resolved. Anyways, let me not drag on any longer. Oh, can you hear that? All I did was turn the key on. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Cooling fan is running. Awesome. Anyway, she's running and running beautifully, guys. And by the way, that noise, gone. I haven't heard it a single time. The engine's running great. It's never ran this good. It sounds great. Yeah, the RPMs are a little high right now, but it's running fantastic. Not a single noise. The engine sounds great. Oh, I'm so stoked out right now, guys. Remember before we couldn't go past 2,000 RPM. Let's see what happens when I try to raise RPM. So the engine was just running, and look at this, guys. No check engine light. The first time this thing has ran and is not throwing a check engine light. Let's see what this is for. Oh, that I don't got my vehicle name set up. And it says I gotta set up the O2 sensor. That's it. Those are the only 2 warnings. But no check engine light, no not this is the best this engine has ever ran. It sounds amazing. What a relief. You know what? The whole night I was thinking to myself, all I kept saying to myself is, you know what, John, don't worry about it. I know for a fact, no matter what it comes out to be the problem on why the engine won't stay running, I know it's not the engine, because I was so meticulous this time. I was so spot on to not miss a single detail. I'm like, there's no way this engine is a problem. Whatever is causing it to not start is not the engine. I can tell you that right now. And I was right. It wasn't the engine. Software, just put the base mat back on it. So I'm just looking over everything, guys, and it's amazing me how a completely fresh rebuild, every single thing has been taken apart. And on very first startup, looking it over, not a single item is dripping or leaking. 100% clean. Underneath the car, no drips, no leaks, nothing. Everything looks super clean, just what I like to see. I wish this is how the engine originally was the first time it ran. Remember how I talked about all the leaks that were starting to develop, which wasn't great, but this time. So as you can see, I got my funnel back on it, and I made sure to top off the coolant. You can see I got a little bit right there, and I'm just burping out the system. Here's what I was talking about before with my cooling fan. You can see this taps into the original harness going that way, and this is my connector right here. All right, so when this wasn't working and I thought it was a wiring issue, I didn't know it was a issue with the software. I needed the cooling fan to work, of course, so I hardwired this connector directly to the battery. You can see there was positive, and I got ground just going right there. So basically I would unplug the connector from right here, the fan, and just plug it into this one, and it would hardwire. The fan was always running, which is what we need so the engine doesn't overheat, right? But now I could pretty much get rid of this if I wanted to, because it's functioning just like it should. It's nice to see that nothing is wrong with the wiring. Alright, so one of the first things I want to go ahead and do is the overflow tank, which is a pretty easy fix. Last time I was saying how the clutch line was in the way of putting the tank where it belongs. So this time I just routed the clutch line a little bit angled more towards the front of the car, so you can see the line has to swoop around, and it basically gives us the clearance that we need to get our overflow tank and put it in its factory location, just like that. Look how clean that looks. All right, this end I already got it connected right here. Of course I need to go out and buy a nice new rubber hose, because this one just looks all beat up, but for right now it's gonna get the job done. The next thing I want to do is the brake booster. Okay, so the first time I test drove this car, granted it wouldn't go past 2,000 RPM, but also that means I couldn't go past like 5 miles per hour. We had no power brakes, so that means the pedal was like really hard to press, and the car just slowed down at best. The next test drive, I'm expecting it to be a completely different experience. So 100% I want my power brakes working. You can see this is the vacuum port for the brake booster, and I got a brand new rubber hose right there. So basically I need a line coming from this port all the way around to this port on the lower half of the intake manifold. And instead of just using a rubber hose, I'm just gonna end up making my own custom line out of this same nylon line that I used to make the fuel lines out of. Of course, it's gonna be a larger diameter one, and that's why I specifically chose this fitting right here, so we can have a quick connect right here. It's gonna be an elbow, a 90-degree elbow, and it's gonna send the line this way, and we just have to terminate it right here when it gets to the brake booster. So I got the new line all plumbed in, and it was way easier the second time around dealing with a hose that's a lot more flexible and easier to work with. One thing I'm liking is because the wall thickness of the new hose isn't as thick as the old one, I was actually able to press in the line all the way to the end. As you can see, I like to put these clamps on, even though they're not necessary with this type of fitting. The press fit is more than good enough. But guys, I'm telling you, I've been using it everywhere, wherever I put these things, as you can see, because you could never be too safe with stuff like this. So clamp, just extra insurance. Anyway, the line takes pretty much the same exact route, and it goes into the same fitting down there. Let's test the brakes. Oh yeah. There is definitely power brakes, guys. Oh, that's amazing. The brake booster is doing its job. Alright, I'm happy. Let's turn this off. So for our new vacuum line going to the brake booster, I found the easiest place to mount it temporarily. All I did was grab a rubber grommet like this. I slid it over the hose. You can see that right there, and you can see there was already a pre-existing bracket on the transmission, and I just grabbed a zip tie and zip tied it to that bracket. And I checked the line all the way from the intake manifold to the brake booster. It's not touching anything on its entire path, so it's not elegant, but it gets the job done, and the line is nice and solid. It's not going to be rubbing against anything. In the future, I'll do something a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner. And I want to put another bracket somewhere over here underneath the intake manifold to support the line, but it's not critical at this moment. It's just something I could come back and do in the future. I'm just going to go ahead and connect the PCV how it would be from factory. As you can see, I already went ahead and put a hose on it, and then this end is just going to go into the vacuum port on the intake manifold. So this one right here is super easy to get to. Don't worry guys, it is going to get a catch can installed, and in fact I already have the catch can here. This is just for the sake of our first slash second real test drive, okay? So that's all set, and now what's going to happen is the intake manifold is going to be pulling vacuum on the PCV and essentially relieving that pressure that builds up inside the engine. I got a brand new hose for the overflow tank, and just as I mentioned before, I didn't want the hose coming this way and straight across because it just didn't look right, looks ugly. So the brand new hose is slightly longer than the original one because I wanted it to loop around, so it's exactly what it's doing. We got it going underneath the air intake filter, comes around here, and I got two zip ties holding it right up against the radiator hose. See it come up right here and goes right into the filler neck. Alright, I think it looks pretty clean. I don't think the upper radiator hose is going to get hot enough to melt the zip tie, but I could be wrong. If it does, then I'll just find a different solution, not a big deal. But for right now, it should be fine. And I mean, granted, the coolant that's passing inside of the radiator hose is the same exact coolant that would be pushed out into the small hose. So them running side by side should not be an issue, if that makes any sense. Many days later, I've just been super busy, really haven't had time to get to the CRX, but as you can see, it is out of its original place. I did try to take it out for a drive today, didn't go so well. It's still kind of doing the same thing. It won't let me go past like 2,000 RPM, which is kind of a bummer. The good news is that noise is gone, okay? There's no more mysterious noise coming from the engine. Haven't heard it a single time. That's fixed, okay? So I mentioned to you guys before how I switched over to the original base mat from Haltech, right? And the engine was a lot happier. It would even stay running. So today I contacted the tuner, and he jumped on the laptop, of course, remotely, right? And he started getting on there and making some adjustments. This thing was idling at like 2,000 RPM consistently. Like it just stays at 2,000 RPM. So he starts messing with the map, and he gets it to come down to like roughly around 1,000 RPM, which is ideal, right? The problem is at 2,000 RPM where it was before, it was very consistent, and yeah, it was revving high, but it sounded good. Now, since he lowered it down to like 1,000 RPM, I mean, this thing sounds like super choppy, just doesn't sound good. You get what I'm saying? And it actually runs worse. With the bass tune from Haltech, like I said, I couldn't drive it fast still, but at least I was able to drive it around the block slowly, right? After he did his tuning, I can't even move the car now. So arguably, it's worse. My oil pressure sensor still is not reading anything. So that's a bummer, right? And he told me that he can't continue to tune unless I get my oxygen sensor or my air fuel ratio sensor fixed. Because he said when I first start up the car, the sensor seems like it's working, it's heating up, and then eventually the sensor just goes flat and it stops working. Well, it's a brand new sensor from Haltech. Guys, I'm just pulling out the hair that I don't have because this thing is extremely frustrating. So I know my oil pressure sensor isn't working, okay? We're not getting any data on the laptop, but I went ahead and removed the sensor. You can see I got it sitting right there, and I put the oil line going into this container. So what I want to do is just crank over the engine. I'm gonna use my power probe right here. Crank the engine over, and we just wanna check for oil pressure, okay? If that sensor is faulty or something's wrong with it, that's one thing, but as long as the engine has oil pressure, that's what I'm looking for.